It's been a long time since I've made a video, so welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to be doing a POV walkaround, tour, and drive of my personal E92 BMW 335i. So the E92 is the 5th generation of the 3 Series, which is the entry model of the BMW lineup. Production years go from 2007 to 2010 for the pre-LCI, and from 2011 to 2013 with the LCI. And this is a 2012. So this generation has 4 body styles: the E90 sedan, E91 wagon, the E92 coupe, and the E93 convertible. And there are also a few engine variants with a naturally aspirated straight 6, which is the N52 and the N53, the turbocharged N54 and 55, which this is an N55, and the naturally aspirated V8 in the M3, which is the S65. Rear-wheel drive is the factory option for a drivetrain, but there's also an all-wheel drive system called xDrive, and this has xDrive. All right, let's go to the engine bay and talk a bit about the engine. So here it is, the N55, a turbocharged 3-liter inline 6. The N55 is a refreshed version of the N54, which is BMW's early attempt at a turbocharged engine. From the factory, both engines make pretty much the same power, 300 horsepower and about 300 torque, but the N54 was known for its tuning potential and its ability to make loads of power on stock internals and turbos. So the N55 can also make good power, but it's limited by its internals and turbo, while the N54 has twin turbos with forged rods and a forged crankshaft from the factory. The N55 has cast everything with a single twin scroll turbo. So the advantage of that is that the N54 can perform better at high RPMs. The N55's turbo loses steam around 5,500 RPM. The one advantage with this though is that the N55 has a much more efficient turbo, spooling a lot quicker with barely any lag. Aside from those differences, there are some improvements for reliability in the N55, such as an upgraded injector design from the piezo style injectors, the integration of Valvetronic with Vanos, an updated high pressure fuel pump for the 2014 and up models, and an electronic wastegate for the turbo, which is also on the 2014 and up models. So the integration of Valvetronic with Vanos allows for more precise engine timing and control, and it eliminates the need to use a throttle body, but there is still one in the engine. But despite the improvements in reliability, there are still a lot of common issues that plague the N55. The first one is that the stock charge pipe that goes from the intercooler down there to the throttle body is made of plastic from the factory, and it tends to become brittle over time and can break, leaving you stranded. So there are a lot of aftermarket replacements that are aluminum, eliminating that issue. As you can see here, I have a VRSF aluminum charge pipe, and it's held up pretty good. So the next issue is a high pressure fuel pump, which is all the way underneath the intake box and right underneath the intake manifold down there. There's a defect in the N54s and early N55s where an O-ring inside the pump will go bad, and if it does go bad, it will lose pressure and the car will not run properly. The only solution is to replace it where it goes bad or upgrade it for tuning purposes. Alright, so with the small engine cover removed, we can look at the next few issues. So the first one I want to talk about is the valve cover gasket. So the valve cover is right here, it goes all the way underneath the cowl there. There's a common issue where that leaks. The oil filter housing gasket right here, there's also a common issue where it leaks from right here and it seeps down onto the belt below. And then the third issue is the oil pan gasket, which is obviously underneath the car. There's a tendency for that to leak over time as well. But the most dangerous of the 3 oil leaks is the oil filter housing gasket here, because if the oil here drips down onto the serpentine belt below, the serpentine belt gets sucked in, potentially destroying your engine. Like the other issues though, there are aftermarket solutions for this. So you can buy a crank seal guard which bolts up right against the crank seal and will prevent that from happening. So the last common issues I can think of are the electronic water pump, which is all the way down below in there, and the coolant expansion tank cracking. So I've actually had my coolant expansion tank develop a hairline crack on the side, which caused it to leak some coolant over time, giving me some low coolant warnings. But that was just a simple replacement and that fixed the issue. However, the water pump, because it's a standalone electronic unit and it's not belt driven, they have a tendency to go bad over time, and they will run after turning off the car, which will burn them out and require a replacement. But aside from these common issues, you can expect there to be some coolant line leakage at higher mileage, as most of the components are plastic, and potential air duct pipes to break as well. I've never had any issues with the fuel pump, valve cover, or oil filter housing, and the water pump, but I have had my oil pan gasket go bad, my radiator crack and leak, my coolant expansion tank crack, as well as some more coolant pipes, and my turbo outlet pipe broke a few months back, which is a simple replacement. And because I'm lowered, the passenger side CV axle went bad. But when it comes down to ownership costs, I will say that it's quite expensive when these break, and maintenance is also expensive, but they're very solid cars otherwise. All right, moving on to things that I've done here. So this car is tuned with MHD on 93 octane and it has full bolt-ons. I have a 3.5 inch VRSF catless downpipe, which goes right there from the turbo to the exhaust. I have a BMS intake. I have a 7-inch ARM intercooler. I have 1-step coulter spark plugs from the N20, a BMS oil catch can, and as I've already shown you before, the VRSF aluminum charge pipe. All right, now let's take a look at the exterior of the car. So previously I spoke about pre-LCI versus LCI. So LCI is just a refreshed version, and here the LCI version of the 335 has bigger LED angel eye headlights at the front, and these are white from the factory, as the pre-LCIs are yellow. The second difference is the mirrors here are much bigger than on the pre-LCIs and more square, while those are more round and smaller. And the final difference are the tail lights here, which are fully red, while the N54 has a white line on the entire bottom part of the tail light housing. So just giving this an initial walk around, you can tell that it's a very aggressive and sporty vehicle. So I've owned this for about 4 years now, going on about 110,000 miles on it. I have enjoyed every part of owning this thing. So looking at it from the side here, you can see that it has a mild drop. So I have some KW V1 coilovers, which give it a good drop and stiffen the ride up a lot. So these cars, especially the X-Drives from the factory, look like monster trucks on stock suspension. So the drop makes it look a whole lot better. One thing to keep in mind is that lowering the front puts stress in the passenger side CV axle, so there's a higher chance of it failing, especially with your higher horsepower cars. And I have some stock style 342 wheels, which are 18 by 8 here in the front and 18 by 8.5 in the rear. And I have some Michelin Pilot Sport all season 4 tires with 255s in the rear and 225s in the front. So appearance wise, I took off the white fins that go on each side by the fog light from the factory, and I have some black kidney grills here. I have some blacked out side repeaters right there. Normally they're clear from the factory. And I have a small carbon fiber trunk lid. And I do have a stock exhaust just with the downpipe, and it sounds pretty decent as is. Let's get some sound clips of that. In my opinion, the N55 is the best sounding 6-cylinder from BMW. The N54 and the S55 are a little raspy, and the B58 just doesn't sound as good as the N55. Alright, so moving on to trunk and storage space. To open the trunk, you have the key here, press and hold the button. Alright, so looking into the trunk here, we can see that there's actually a decent amount of space for a small two-door car. It goes all the way in here, and I have a small cargo net here that I bought online from BMW. This hooks in here and here, and then 2 more hooks in the back. This has been very useful for bringing home groceries and just keeping things down so they don't move around too much in the trunk. I have a air compressor kit from BMW, and you can see that there's a bit more storage space here on the side. Underneath this panel here is some stereo stuff, and on the right side here we have the owner's manual, a safety vest kit, and underneath the owner's manual here there's actually a small toolkit. So here you have your tow hook, a small screwdriver, a small wrench, and a sunroof closing tool if your battery is ever dead. And underneath this entire panel here we have the battery. An advantage that this car has is that it has folding seats. So you pull the 2 levers here, and then you can just push the seats down to have a lot more storage space. I personally brought home full sets of 19-inch wheels and tires, so there's actually a good amount of storage space, but you will have to sacrifice the back 2 seats for that. All right, now that we've seen the engine bay, the trunk, and exterior, let's go check out the interior. All right, so once you're seated in the 335, you can see that there's a very comfortable and spacious interior. On the driver's side here, you have your headlight controls, fog light, front and rear. You have your window controls, your mirror controls, your small little handle slash cubby here, a folding door panel with a larger door pocket back here. And here in the footwell, you have your button to access the trunk right there. You have your hood release, and your pedals are easy to reach, feel good, and have good spacing. So on the side of your steering wheel here, you have your turn signals, and you have ways to interact with your display here, and you also have your cruise control switch down here. So looking at the center console here, starting at the back, you have a small storage cubby, your handbrake, you have your iDrive controller, your shifter here, another small storage cubby, and I have a phone mount with my charging wire. You have a power socket down in the passenger footwell, and you also have a power socket right in there. All right, moving on to your climate controls and radio. Here you have your preset buttons down here. You can assign these to whatever you want. You have your volume knob, different modes, and you would have different functions depending on what options you have down here. So I just have hill descent control in here. And moving a bit further up, you have your AC controls. You have your different zones, your defroster, AC, rear defroster, all that. And something interesting to note here is that you actually have a restart button right here on your steering wheel, so you don't got to reach over here to press it while you're driving. Moving further up, you have your 2 vents here, hazard, lock, unlock, traction control, and your temperature dial. Over here you have your wiper controls, your start stop switch, and your engine key slot. So it just goes in to start the car like that. Now with the key in, we can see our iDrive screen here. Obviously you can access everything, all the functions you need. And on the right side here, we have our cup holders. So another common issue with these cars is that these cup holders fail to spring out like this over time. So as you can see, this one still works. It comes out by itself. But this cup holder recently broke, so it doesn't come out by itself anymore. The replacement is to just get a new cup holder cartridge. And for the most part, the passenger side is the same as the driver's side. Looking up, we have our dome mirror controls, our sunroof controls, SOS, flip down, and on our mirror here we have our garage opener controls, and I have a small dash cam and my radar detector hardwired into my mirror. Looking further back, we have our sunroof and light controls for the rear, and we have speakers all around the car. We have a Harman Kardon sound system, so we have speakers in the doors, in the walls, and in the back seat. So an interesting feature to note back here is that you can see that there's an arm that hands the seatbelt to the driver. I've actually never seen it from the back. It's pretty cool. But overall, the back seats really are not that bad for a two-door car. Normally, you're pretty cramped in the back with most other two doors. The seats are pretty tall and wide here with some nice bolstering here and here. And there are some armrests over here, and you have a pretty large window to look out. Unfortunately, these windows don't hinge or open at all. They're just fixed. But moving on to the middle here, we have a small box where you can store some coins or screws that I have in there. We have our little air vents here. We have a small pad, and you can just put your phone on there or something. We have another small cubby for storage, and we have our cup holders back here slash armrest, which open up. There is an option on some cars to have a ski access kind of door here, so you can access the trunk without even having to drop the seats. So that's about it for the rear seat tour. So let's go ahead, get back in the driver's seat and go for a drive. All right, so here we are back in the driver's seat of the 335. So to start the car, you have to take your key, put it into the slot right underneath the steering wheel until it clicks. Your iDrive turns on, your dash turns on. Make sure it's in neutral, clutch in, press the button. All right, so I've owned this car for about 4 years, so I may be a bit biased with some of my opinions here, but I'll try to be as neutral as I can. So honestly, I love the car just from an ownership perspective. It's been a great car to me. It's got me through college, never left me stranded. Nothing bad ever happened mechanically. It's honestly a very solid car. Yeah, there are some increased maintenance costs associated with it, but it's treated me well thus far. As long as you do your maintenance on time and make sure it's done with high quality parts, preferably OEM, you should have no problem in driving and owning this for a long period of time. So in terms of daily drivability, it's pretty comfortable. The seats are wide, they're not that deep, they have good bolstering on them. We have our heated seat functions here, so that's very useful in the cold season. AC blows cold, obviously. The heat warms up quickly. I mean, it's got everything that you really need out of a daily driver. I mean, sure, there's the inconvenience of it being a two-door and taking people around, but if it's mostly you and maybe you haul one passenger once in a while, it's really not that big of a deal. It's got plenty of storage space. Fuel economy is all right. I get maybe 21 city, and the most I ever got in the highway is about 24 and a half miles per gallon. So fuel economy is one thing that you might be a little concerned about with ownership, because it does take premium. So fuel costs do add up, is one thing I'll say. But aside from that, I use FCP Euro to get my brakes, to get my fluids, to get my wipers, all my consumables, wipers, spark plugs, everything I might need from them. So thankfully I was able to get a lot of that stuff before they went to their store credit only policy, so I can still get cash refund on those if I really wanted to. In terms of interior modification here, I haven't really done too much. I mean, I have a small little trim and red start stop button instead of the stock black one because my old one is peeling. On the left side here, usually the rear fog lights are not active in the US, or they kind of block off the button, I should say. So to do that, you just kind of have to pull out the headlight switch little box and then make your own solution to something that'll be able to press the button and remove the block that's stopping it from pressing in the first place. So I have this custom made steering wheel here. It's a bit thicker than stock, and it has this nice perforated leather combined with a smooth leather and some tricolor stitching all the way around with this little M logo here, kind of like the 335IS steering wheel with a bit more customized touch to it. And I have the M Sport shift knob, which is a bit more weighted than the stock one, and it provides a lot better shifting feel. This is actually from my first video that I ever made. And I used to have a UUC Evo 3 short shifter kit, but I recently had it removed because of reinstallation issues, and I just went back to a stock shifter with all refreshed bushings and parts. The UUC shifter had a lot of play while it was in gear, and even in neutral I was able to move it about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch just while I was in gear. But now with the stock shifter, with everything refreshed, it's tight, barely moves, and it goes in every gear even better than it did before. So another thing that I want to mention here is that I have my clutch delay valve removed. So that's a valve in the clutch lines from the factory that slows down the re-engagement of the clutch so that there's less jerky inputs and is overall more smooth for the driver. But honestly, it just feels like the clutch is lagging, because when you let it out, it doesn't fully re-engage until a moment later, and it makes for frustrating and sometimes unpredictable kind of driving. Once you remove that valve, the clutch becomes pretty much like a 1-to-1 engagement with the pedal and how it feels. So it's like any other manual car. So for daily driving, the steering is nice and heavy, especially at lower speeds. It's a little too heavy because of the hydraulic steering. It's the last of the hydraulic steering in BMWs. So it feels great at low speed, at high speed. The shifting is nice and smooth. It goes through all the gears like butter. Takes no effort. It never grinds or pops. It never gives any feedback. Sometimes it does give some resistance putting it into first from a stop, but that's on very rare occasions. So the 335 does have bigger brakes than, let's say, the 328. So braking is actually quite good and very reliable in this car. I've tracked this car quite a few times, and I've never been afraid of having brake fade or anything like that. But you also have to make sure that you're running a quality fluid that's new. So I'm at about 109,000 miles, going on 110 soon, and the car feels like brand new. It's super smooth. There are barely any creaks and noises like you'd expect from a bit of an older car. I mean, here and there's just some on higher wear areas, but overall it's quite smooth, noise free, and comfortable. But this thing does have some great handling, acceleration, and top speed. From the factory, the top speed is limited to about 155 miles an hour, but with the limiter removed, you can easily hit 170 to 175 miles an hour. The N55 makes about 300 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque from the factory, with horsepower peaking at about 5,500 RPMs and then dropping off from there, and torque peaking at about 1,300 RPMs, which makes it very torquey low down and feels quite like a V8 would. So the crazy thing is that this motor has peak torque from 1,300, like I said, but it goes from 1,300 RPMs all the way up until about 5,600 RPMs. So no matter what gear you're in, if you floor it at any speed, it just pulls like a freight train. And that's in 5th gear at 70 miles an hour. So overall, if you're just trying to get into BMWs and German cars in general, I would say that with the right knowledge, tools, and time commitment, the 335 is a great start. If you're like a young 16-year-old who just got their license and is looking for a car, I don't know if the 335 would be the best option for you. The amount of power combined with the maintenance costs usually lead to either accidents, tickets, or neglect of maintenance. And for a car like this, you want to stay on top of everything that you can. But if you have the budget and you have the time and you're just looking for a new car to get into, this platform has a lot to offer. Yeah, I'd recommend it to anybody that's on the edge about buying one of these. Just make sure that it has all the common maintenance items done. Make sure it's not leaking oil from anywhere, and that all the maintenance has been done with good intervals and good parts. So that's all I have for this video. If you guys liked the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I'll link my Instagram down below at @TheBlackBimmer for this channel. If you guys could please go check it out and give it a follow. Thanks for watching.